Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Vivek Brown, and I welcome you to this series of conversations that we are starting today called Victorious Believers. So, in this time of crisis that we are going through, and there is so much negativity around, and people are concerned about a lot of things. We are concerned about our jobs. You are concerned about your career, your education of your children. A lot of things are suffering in this lockdown, and this is an unprecedented time of crisis that we are seeing. We have never ever seen such a time, and yes, it is a time of crisis. But then we have all faced some or the other crisis at some point of time. And at this point of time, we decided not to focus on this crisis to pull you down, but to have your self-belief intact, have your belief in God intact, and believe that everything will work together for good as it has worked all the times that you have been through a small or big crisis. So this is just a bigger form of a crisis. So this series, we are trying to build your faith. We are trying to build your belief in yourself and your belief in God, so that we come out victorious from this crisis. So on the first episode of this series, we have with us Mr. Rajiv Chelladurai. Rajiv comes with over 2 decades of experience in the corporate world. And right now, I like it as he puts it that after all this experience and exposure and the work in the corporate world, he decided to, pursue his purpose, that was to sit. So sit here means to speak, inspire, and teach. And that he's doing through an organization he set up in 2017 called Ergo's Mind. So Rajiv is a leadership coach. He is an employee wellness coach. Rajiv is an author of 2 books have been published, and I believe third is also on the way and it has been completed. So Rajiv is an author and a wisdom coach. It is our privilege and my honor that Rajiv, you accepted our invitation to start off this series. And without further delay, I would like to invite you to share with us. So first we'll have a talk from Rajiv. He'll tell us how he overcome his crisis and what are the learning from those crises. Similarly, we believe that we can come out of this crisis with a lot of learnings. So looking forward to a very inspiring session with Rajiv. And if you have any questions in the mind, you can send in through YouTube chat. If you are on YouTube live, please send your questions. We'll have them addressed in the last from Rajiv. So we'll have a talk from Rajiv first. So over to you, Rajiv. Welcome once again.
Right. Vivek, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, we are in a crisis, unprecedented. And we keep using the word unprecedented so often, but that is the reality of it. We haven't seen something like this in the magnitude as which it has hit us. Having said that, I also think post this crisis, it's going to turn and open up a lot of opportunities and new conditions. But before getting there, I just want to take you to a journey that me and my family went through in terms of a personal crisis and some of the lessons that we learned in terms of how do you deal with crisis. So it was the 20th of June, 2016. It was 12:15 a.m., wee hours of 20th June. There was a knock on the door where my wife and me were. It was a hospital room. That's where my daughter was admitted. She was 13 years old. A few hours before 12:15, she was rushed into the ICU. She was really sick. She had severe post-operative complications. And as a consequence, she really was beginning to deteriorate. So they rushed her into the ICU a few hours on the 19th of June, maybe at about 8:30 p.m. in the night. At 12:15, we get this knock, and it's always a scary thing to get a knock at that time, especially when you're in the hospital. Opening the door of that room, I found a nurse who was standing there. This nurse said, "You need to rush to the ICU. The HOD of the ICU wants to meet with you." That got me all the more scared. You see, that was an air-conditioned, hospital, but just hearing those words caused me to perspire. I walked into the ICU, which wasn't too far away, maybe 400 meters away, and as I went there, I noticed an anxious-looking HOD of the ICU waiting for me. As soon as I came there, she didn't give me a chance with no highs and hellos, but straight away looked at me and said, "Your daughter is not well. In fact, she's sinking. She's got into septic shock and her organs are failing." I looked beyond the doctor and I could see my daughter there. She was on a ventilator. She had lost consciousness. There were 4 or 5 doctors around her. They were working on her, trying to revive her. There were tubes all over her. It was not looking good. I brought my look back to the doctor, and the doctor looked at me and said, "You need to prepare for the worst." No parent would like to hear those kind of words. So that was a moment of reckoning for me. It was a moment when I realized that all the power that I thought I had in myself, I was powerless at that point. All the money that I thought I had, I realized that was worthless. It couldn't save me from my daughter from the situation. All the contacts I thought that I had for myself, I realized could not actually help me at that particular point. Now, beyond this situation, we also got the biopsy that was done, and the biopsy results that came went looking good. It said that she had what was called ganglioneuroblastoma, which is a situation where part of the growth is benign and part of it is malignant. So, if she survived this complication of this post-operative situation and the septic shock, which normally people have a very remote chance of surviving, then she would have to fight the battle with cancer, which would mean chemotherapy and radiation. You can understand that the kind of situation we were in and the trauma that we were in. We didn't expect this. This hit us all of a sudden. My daughter was healthy when she got admitted, but so we didn't anticipate things like this. We anticipated a 7-day stay in the hospital post-surgery, and we returned. We didn't expect to stay in the hospital for 88 days. We didn't expect 5 surgeries in totality. We didn't expect to see our daughter on a life support system several times. We didn't expect tubes to surround her. We didn't expect to hear the words, "Your daughter may not make it," right? And least did we expect chemotherapy and radiation. You can understand a situation like this. One, it shakes you. Now, I think the point is, how do you respond to a situation like this? One, the natural response is to get disappointed, to get fearful, and to get sucked in by the enormity of the situation. Or the second is, you can respond to it. And I think when a crisis requires a response and not a reaction, I want you to hear that. A crisis requires a response and not a reaction. A reaction is impulsive. A reaction is going with the emotional flow. Whatever your emotions tell you, you end up doing it. Okay? Reactions are knee-jerk, but response are measured. Response, despite your emotional state, you are able to decide from a calm space in your mind. Response is about taking one step at a time, right? Even though you can't see what the next steps are, you just take one step at a time. So it taught us several lessons. And I want to share with you quickly some of the lessons this crisis taught us. One, I think it taught us and made us realize the certainty of life lies in its uncertainty, right? I mean, look at where we are. We all entered 2020, and I just went back to my social media and I was looking at all the posts that came for New Year. right? And I encourage you to do that as well. If you go back to the post that you saw during New Year, everybody put 2020 vision, right? That was a common theme. Everybody put 2020 vision and this and that, right? Did anybody who put that 2020 vision did ever visualize that the world would come to a standstill because of a virus that is invisible to a naked eye? Nobody. We all put 2020 vision, right? Did anybody visualize that nations will be in lockdown? Not just places, but nations will be in lockdown. Nobody visualized that. Did anybody realize that businesses will be shut down? No, we didn't, right? So we got to realize that the certainty of life lies in its uncertainty. And the test of leadership is not how you deal with certainty, but how you respond to uncertainty. The second lesson that I learned is about the importance of creating networks. The importance of creating networks. You see, when we got the reports and we got the need to do a biopsy, the first thing that we did was, I mean, the first problem that we had to cross was where would we do it, right? We live in Mumbai, but we are not from Mumbai. We are from the south. And second, you hear about all this medical commercialism, right? You want to go to the right place where you get the right kind of treatment. And the way we could arrive at that decision was to reach out to the networks that we have built. People who knew doctors, people who had doctors in their family, people who were doctors. So we reached out to the networks. And I think it's very important that in good times to build networks. Because when the bad times come, when crisis comes, that's the time you need to be leveraging these networks. So invest time on building networks. The third lesson that we learned is about leaning on strength from within and without. You see, any crisis, and especially when we were going through that crisis, we had to lean on strength from above, right? Which is our faith in God. We had to lean on strength from each other, which is family. But we also had to lean on strength from our friends and acquaintances and people who are well-meaning. Now, all people are well-meaning. Now, there are two types of people who will sympathize with you and pity you. Now, you don't, I mean, they are well-meaning people, but I don't think they can add too much of value, right? But people who empathize with you, who stand with you, who support you, right? Who may not say too many things, but are standing with you. So it's important to draw strength from them. Don't try to be a Superman or Superwoman, trying to be a warrior by yourself. You will fail. You will actually fail, right? So lean on strength from within and lean on strength from around you. The next lesson that we learned is staying positive and doing what you need to stay afloat. When I look back at that situation during that 88-day stay at the hospital, there were many moments that we could not do too much by ourselves because we were not in control of the situation, right? You just couldn't do anything. It really depended on the rate of healing. It depended on the medication, response to medication. And we would get, and we realized that it was beyond the control. At this point, you got to realize what is in your control and focus on what's in your control and not worry about what is not in your control, right? And I think that's a great lesson in terms of responding to a crisis. Now, when we look at our situation and the COVID, what is in your control? What can you do about that? What is not in your control? Can you open the office now? Can you meet customers now face to face? It's not in your control. You can't do that, right? But the things in your control, you need to focus on that. Can you upskill, right? Can you network? Can you reach out to customers virtually, right? Can you train your team during this time virtually? You can do all that. So I'm just giving you examples. So what is in your control? And it's very important to stay positive when the chips are down. The normal emotional response is get disappointed. It's normal. But when the chips are down, you got to choose to stay positive and take control of what you have in control and not worry about what you cannot control. You see, we also learned that often it gets worse before it gets better, right? I told you, my daughter's situation was such that she would take one step forward in terms of recovery, and she would take 5 steps backwards, right, in terms of falling sick further. And one of the doctors, who was actually a cousin of mine, he said, Rajiv, remember, it'll get worse before it gets better. I didn't like that advice at that time, but I think when I look back, I think it was the truth. And so it is with life when you're fighting crises. And a crisis like this right now, you'll probably have one round of lockdown, they'll probably open up, they'll probably close down again. That's exactly what happened in Singapore. Singapore opened up, right? Things look very good. Guess what? They had another shutdown. They opened up, they're not shut down, right? Right? I think they have a shutdown till June 1st, if I'm not mistaken. It often gets worse before it gets better. And these are moments that you don't let your frustrations get the better of you. But you do your routine. You do what is expected of you. You do what you're supposed to be doing at that particular point in time. And this is where resilience comes into play. Okay, you got to be resilient. You got to be, swimming against the tide, so to speak, right? I want to tell you that leadership is certainly no cup of tea, nor is it a piece of cake, right? We often think leadership is a fancy title, it's a corner office, and you got so many people reporting to you. Hey, don't fall prey for that kind of a thinking, right? Leadership is no cup of tea, nor is it a piece of cake. And very often in leadership, you will need to survive by just hanging on, literally by the skin on your teeth. Anyone can throw the towel. Anyone can throw the towel when the crisis comes. But to stay on despite the pressure and the oppressive conditions is a sign of authentic leadership. A next lesson that we learned is you got to adapt to the new normal instead of fighting change. You see, every crisis will bring a new normal with it. We entered 2016 very happy that we had no clue of what the year was going to hold, had in store for us with regards to our daughter's ailment and this and that and ICU and ventilator and chemotherapy and radiation. We had no clue about that, right? But when it happened, we had to quickly make the choice. Do I sit or stand and crib and say, I didn't bargain for this crisis. I had dreams, I had goals, I had ambitions. This is unfair. This can't come to me, right? That was one option of a reaction. Or the response saying, hey, you know what, this has happened. I didn't expect it, but it's there. Let me accept the reality of it. You see, the faster you accept the reality of the change in season, the faster you accept the reality of a new normal, the easier it is for you to identify the conditions of the new normal and recognize the opportunities that a new normal gives you. If you don't and you allow yourself to be held hostage to the past, right, you miss out on the present and you destroy opportunities of the future, right? So that's the call we took. That's the response that we actually took. And the faster you make the transition, the better. The next lesson we learned was it's important to be emotionally anchored. Okay, you can imagine the trauma that we went as parents, right? It's very tough to see your child sick. Okay, now I had different thoughts within me. To be honest, there were thoughts sometimes saying, hey, is it worth to be alive? Is it really worth to be alive? When you're not in control of the situation, when you can't stand for your child, when you can't do anything for your child, right? Is it worth to be alive? But don't allow yourself to be driven by the tsunami of emotions. And there will be emotions. But it's very important for you to be emotionally anchored. You see, the problem with allowing one's emotion to get the better of you, it obstructs you from making the right kind of decisions. And that prevents you from taking the right set of actions. Leaders need to manage their emotions because very often the state of the leader's emotions is a reflection of the team's emotion. Okay? The state of the leader's emotion is a reflection of the team's emotion. But let's say a leader is always short-tempered. More often than not, that will be the prevailing emotion of the team. Okay? If the leader gives up easily and says, forget it, you know what? That will be the prevailing emotion of the team as well. So it's very important to be emotionally anchored, right? Self-awareness, emotional expression, how you express yourself. filtering out emotions when you want to make a decision making, right? Looking at a problem objectively, filtering out emotions so that you're able to manage stress, right? Emotions when you're interacting with others. All these are important and very crucial components of emotional intelligence. Being emotionally anchored is so very important. It's important during a crisis to celebrate. Yes, you heard me right. It's important during a crisis to celebrate. You got to find reasons to celebrate. When you're in a crisis, your mindset is down, you're gloomy, you're so full of surrounded by negatives, but you have to find the positives. Crisis times, you have to look for opportunities and you have to look for positives. Identifying positives are very, very important. In my own situation with my daughter scene, every time her report started turning a little positive. Every time she had to take a few steps, each step would be painful because she's surrounded with tubes. She had to take 3 steps to walk from the bed to the chair. And it was very important she sat, because if she's going to be lying down all the time, the doctor said that her muscles would lose the strength. And it happened. So she would be supported by 2 people, each holding tubes and holding her. And each step, she would gasp for breath. Each step, she'd be profusely perspiring. And when the moment she sits on the chair, it was a moment of celebration for us, right? So we found moments to celebrate. So even in a crisis, look for moments to celebrate, right? Often it's natural for us to encourage people, appreciate people when they've completed a job. And I think it's good to do that. But when do people need encouragement the most? When they are swimming against the tide, when they're climbing up. The climb is so important. That's when they need the applause. And the applause is fuel for them to accelerate the climb. So find ways to celebrate the progress. I think it's important to realize this, that the road to progress is loaded with obstacles and setbacks. The road to progress is loaded with obstacles and setbacks. Like I told you, every time my daughter would make progress, right, it would be 3 steps back to the ICU, back on the ventilator, back on this, just when we thought she was making progress. And that was a constant journey. And that taught me a lesson. If you are pursuing a goal of significance, if you are pursuing a goal that is worth it, the road will be difficult. If the passage or the journey is not difficult, then the destination that you're going to is not an attractive destination. Okay? If it is not, if what you're pursuing for as a goal is not tough, that means the goal is not valuable enough. Everything, great achievements have always started with difficulty and obstacles, right? If there are no difficulty and obstacles, I will add and say the goal perhaps is not worth it, right? The road to progress is always loaded with obstacles and setbacks. And finally, I just want to share with you, this is the lesson that we also learned, that your reward is contained in your perseverance. Your reward is contained in your perseverance. So after 88 days in the hospital, coming back to Mumbai and going to Tata Memorial Hospital, for those of you who are familiar with Tata Memorial Hospital, one of the cancer specialty hospitals here, right? Going through chemo, supposed to go through 10 cycles of chemo, but went through 5 because the doctors noticed that the wound was opening up by giving chemo. They said it's risky to give chemo. And it just didn't make sense to me because, when you're fighting cancer, chemo is something which is important and you don't give chemo, what do you do? Then the doctor said, no, just give her these tablets. We'll see what happens. Frankly, they had not seen a case like this. So we went through 5 rounds of chemo, multiple rounds of radiation, right? And today, as we sit in 2020, I'm happy to say by God's grace alone, my daughter is cancer-free. She's fine. She's doing a 12th standard. She's pursuing her NEET entrance because she's praying and hoping and putting all her efforts that she can actually become a doctor, given all that she went through. And she wants to actually serve children fighting cancer, right? So that has been some of the lessons that we learned when we went through a crisis. And I think any crisis, be it a health crisis, be it a financial crisis, be it a crisis of of business. These principles that I shared with you are principles which are common, right? These are common principles that we need to embrace to take on life's challenges. With this, I'll hand it over to Vivek to take us forward.
Thank you, Rajiv. As always, inspiring. Rajiv, if possible, we'll have some question, and if possible, I would like you to show the picture of your family, and if you could,
you'll have to give me a minute. I'll have to just search for that. Right? Give me a second.
Yeah. Till then, we'll have some questions.
Sure.
So the first point that Rajiv, I am intrigued that you said is that a crisis requires a response and not a reaction.
Yeah.
So my small question into that is, how is it? Because normally, as humans, we are wired to react.
Yeah.
So how do you train yourself, or how do you, prepare yourself to respond in every situation?
Okay. So I'm just hold on to the question for a minute. I'm just bringing up the picture.
Sure.
Yeah. Just give me 1 second. Can you see it, Vivek?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that, for those who are seeing, that's my daughter when she was sick. And yeah, this is us now. This is she right now. Right. So yeah, by God's grace, she's doing well. Yeah. So coming back to your question, how do you not react but respond? I think it's one, being aware, being self-aware that my impulse right now is either to get angry, react angrily. My impulse right now is to get upset. My emotional impulse is to kind of deny what I'm going through. To be self-aware of it, right? And choose not to pursue that emotional drive. Instead, you choose your response. See, reaction is instinctive. Reaction just comes through an emotional drive. A response is you pause. You pause after the event, and between your expression of action, there's a pause. And in that pause, you decide what is your action going to be. Okay, and then we call it practicing the pause. And the moment you pause, you choose, okay, now I understand it's not a good situation. I understand I don't have control right now. What is the best action I can take in a situation like this? Okay, what is an action that will help me to uh, go through the crisis right now? What is an action I should not take? Because if I take this action, it's going to make things worse, right? It all happens in that pause. Now, the pause can be a minute, the pause can be overnight, but give it some time, whether it's a minute, 5 minutes, overnight, to choose what your best reaction is. If required, talk to somebody who's close to you and say, you know what, I'm feeling this way. I want to do this, right? What do you think I should do? So if you're not able to take the right set of actions and not think objectively, talk to somebody and bounce off your thoughts and get a right response as well. So it comes with practice, but the more you start practicing it, you become self-aware, and it helps you to take the right response instead of reacting.
Yeah, great thought. And I like the first thing, that statement that you made, that the certainty of life lies in its uncertainty. And that's so true. And people are talking so much about this uncertain times, but times have always been uncertain, I believe.
Absolutely.
The life
Absolutely.
has always been uncertain, right?
Absolutely.
And people don't realize it's just got bigger. Maybe now people realize it more, that it's the certainty of life is in its uncertainty.
Absolutely.
That's great. And also an important point that you made, that we are missing at this point, I mean the lifestyle that we are going on in, that the importance of creating networks, right? The close networks, we are losing on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
think
any tips? Any
I,
tips?
I think, Vivek, it's important to invest time on building and cultivating these networks. When times are good, before COVID happened, we all live such busy lives, right? You would wake up in the morning, get ready, fight traffic, get to work, then do a lot of stuff at work, stay on late most times, fight traffic, come back home, watch some TV, have dinner, go to bed, right? You're not called to be a machine. You're not human. You're not human doings. We are human beings, right? And in this pursuit, we tend to sacrifice the important for the urgent. Okay. Now, the important things, one of the important things is building networks, is to take time in your calendar, in your monthly calendar, your weekly calendar, and say, you know what, I'm going to spend 1 hour a week, or I'm going to spend 3 hours a month catching up with people. Okay. I'm going to identify people who can add value to me. You see, my effectiveness is really a sum of the number of people that I hang out with, in a sense, right? The quality of people that I spend time with has a significant bearing on me, and I need to realize that. And as we were not created as human beings to be lone range warriors. Okay, we were created for community. We were created to hang around with people and collaborate and things like that. That's why we were built. But somewhere along the line, we've forgotten that. So when you cultivate these networks, you never know when it's going to help you. uh, it can help you in your career. It can help you on your job. You can check with people in terms of, hey, you know what, I'm going through this challenge. Any ideas that you got, and how have you done it in your industry? You can listen what's going on in your industry and take some best practices from there and give it here. So invest time. You never know, in times like this, right? Networks help. If you want to get people to refer you on to other customers, this is the time to do that. So, but if you've not built your networks, it will be a challenge. So, very important. Even as you grow up in the corporate ladder, networking, as they say, becomes very important. But networking has to be give and take. It cannot be a selfish motive of only taking. So that's, I think, is a very important aspect for personal development in terms of what networks are you cultivating.
Okay, so one of the questions from the audience, we'll take two questions actually. So Manoj Verma, my friend, actually, he heads and he comes from insurance industry. You know it well. So he asked, how do I demonstrate my capabilities to my sales team in this pandemic, and how do I motivate them?
Yeah. Manoj from Aditya Birla?
Yes, yes, you know him.
Oh, yeah. Sounds very familiar. Yeah.
Right.
So, Manoj, I think my answer to that would be, I think first of all, you got to show concern to your team, right? You got to show that you care about your team. I think that's the first thing. Yes, we're all concerned about business, but people first, right? Once people realize that they are cared for, and once we add value to people, they will create value for us. Remember that. Once we add value to people, they will create value to us, right? So show people that you care for them. Second, look at opportunities to listen to what their challenges are. And some of the challenges could be, I'm not able to meet clients face to face, right? So can you problem solve together? Can you train your team in terms of how do you make a virtual sale, right? How do you approach customers virtually? Can you train them in terms of how do you prospect virtually on LinkedIn, on social media? How do you approach customers? How do you present solutions virtually? Training them to use platforms such as Zoom, if it's allowed in your organization, or Skype, or WebEx, or whatever you're using, right? Training them to do that. I think it's also important to have a lot of fellowship, is one word, or getting people, your teams together virtually at high frequencies, maybe even 3 days, to say, how's it going So open conversation channels with them. So skill them on virtual, uh, open conversations with them as often. And remember, I'm using the word conversations and not meetings, because we're so used to meetings, right? Conversations are exactly what we're doing right now, where I talk, you talk, we're talking, it's non-threatening, it's not transactionally based only. So you have conversations with them, right? And most importantly, show concern for them. Concern, conversations, and train, upskill your team right now. Celebrate success, like what I told you. Find ways to celebrate success. So these are 3, 4 things that you should be doing during this time. Please understand, as you are going through a transition, your team is also going through a transition. Your customers are also going through a transition. But I also think this is a great time to create awareness about life insurance. As a customer, there can be never a better time than now.
Right, right, right. Yeah, and mostly, when you speak, I remind that mostly we don't celebrate small successes.
Yeah.
So we are always looking for big success, and we
Yeah.
don't celebrate small successes. So it is very important to celebrate a small success as well. Another question I have from another friend of mine, Pallavi. She is asking, how do you keep yourself motivated every day in this crisis? So how do you motivate yourself every day?
Yeah, I think it's important to motivate yourself every day. And you have to find means and methods to motivate yourself, right? Yesterday's motivation won't work today. Somebody asked the legendary Zig Ziglar. Okay, I'm sure you heard of Zig Ziglar. Zig Ziglar
Yes,
was an amazing motivation guru, sales coach, author, amazing man, right? He said it's like having a bath, right? Uh, I can't depend on yesterday's bath, right? I'll be stinking today. So same way, just because you were motivated yesterday, it'll probably sustain you for that particular day. But you need to motivate yourself, which means read good stuff which motivate you. Uh, Connect with people who motivate you. It's great to get into a session like this because you're getting motivated, right? So get into such forums, okay? Um, you must, so those are extrinsic motivations which you must take an action to get sources of that extrinsic motivation. But then there's the intrinsic motivation. An intrinsic motivation is an outcome of a goal that you've set for yourself. If you've set for yourself a goal can be of 2 types. A goal can be on results, right? So let's take Manoj's example. If Manoj is selling insurance, his goal could be, I want to sell 50 lakhs of insurance in the next 30 days, right? That's a goal for him. And when he achieves that goal, he feels very excited. And as he's achieving it, he's motivated about that. Uh, the goal can be the other way around as well, which means I want to meet 100 customers today. I don't care about what business I'm going to get, but I want to meet 100 customers and I want to have discussions with those 100 customers. I want to tell them about either my product or service. Whether they buy or not, that's different. But my goal is 100. So you can have a goal on the input. The first example was on the output. You can have a goal on the input as well. Goals excite you. You see, I mean, I'm a gym guy, okay? I mean, I used to weigh almost 100 kgs, but a few years back, I brought my weight down to 79 to 80 actually. And now I manage 82, 83, that kind of a range. So I used to go to the gym every day. Every time I go to the gym, the first thing I'll do is to check my weight. And as long as I'm in that weight range, it would motivate me, right? So goals motivate you intrinsically. I spoke to you about extrinsic motivation. I spoke to you about intrinsic motivation. One thing that you should also do is avoid people and things that demotivate you. Avoid them, right? I mean, you watch the news, but if the news is only going to be telling you bad news, bad news, bad news, hey, why do you watch it, right? Why do you watch it? If certain people, you want to hang out with certain people, and in that group, you always come back feeling slightly demotivated, why do you want to be there, right? So find out people, things that demotivate you, and often it's in the subconscious state. Become consciously aware of what is demotivating you and avoid it. Okay, so choose to motivate yourself. Intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, and recognize what's demotivating you, and don't invest your time and effort in those places.
That's great. I always like to do it this way, that you architect a win. So that means you take up a small goal, you
Yeah.
write it down, and so I normally, whenever I have to motivate myself, cooking is my escape.
Nice.
So I put that goal, and then it's take. So you feel satisfied and motivated to do new things.
Awesome.
Right? Uh, so someone is also typing a question, and then we'll take. But I'll quickly summarize the learnings,
Sure.
Rajiv. And
Sure.
so the number one statement that I liked, and that we have to cling on to in such times of crisis, and times always have been uncertain. So the certainty of life lies in its uncertainty. That is the main statement I would like you to keep on with you and go. Second, whenever you are faced with crisis, respond and not react. So you have to train yourself to respond to a situation and just not just react. And as Rajiv told, that you should have a pause to respond, right? Then the learning, one important learning has been that importance of creating networks, right? So as we are getting far and far now, it is very important that you create networks, and you create close networks. And in creating networks, if I may add, it is not just about getting help. So you invest in people, give first, and then you create networks like that. And then learning from strength within and without, right?
Leaning on strength from within.
Leaning on strength from within and without. So in that we talked about resilience and dexterity. Staying positive and doing what you need to stay afloat. And one more, what I liked, very unique, and often it gets worse before it gets better. So it's so true. If you'll see it, whenever you have had struggles, it will get worse until it gets better, right? So the last mile, as they say, is the hardest, right? So very profound learning, that often it gets worse before it gets better. So if you are having a worse time you feel, right, so hang on to it, it's going to be better, right? If it's grinding you right now, so that means that your time of escape is going to come, right? And adapt the new normal. This is the new normal that people have been saying that this is the new normal. So you adapt the new normal instead of fighting the change, right? And being emotionally anchored, very important. Rajiv very rightly said. And celebrate progress, celebrate small steps of progress, right? Very important. And the road to progress is filled with obstacles and setbacks, right? And your reward is contained in your perseverance, right? So your reward is contained. You saw the life story that Rajiv has told. So your reward is contained in your perseverance, right? And Rajiv, I would like you gave I remember you gave an acronym somewhere of fear.
False
So I'll
evidence appearing up.
Yeah, so I would we have two questions actually from the audience, so quickly we'll take two questions, and then
Sure.
I would like if you would close with the acronym of fear that you have given.
Sure.
So from Khwahish Skills, Pathak sir asked, we are a training provider and connected with industries and students. How can we keep students motivated, keeping industry interest intact? Both are interconnected in present and post-COVID situation. So, industry is facing problems, and the skill development people, so people not being placed. So both the sides, how do we address the situation? That is what he wants to ask.
Yeah, I think, I don't have a thought out answer on that, but let me give it a shot. I think skill development is going to be a very important aspect in a post-COVID world. Okay, so if you are in L&D, if you're in skill development, I think you're in the right place. Having said that, I think it's important for you to understand what the new normal is. Will you have many classroom trainings, as many as you had earlier? I'm not so sure. You will have for sure, but not as many. So I think if you're in L&D and you're in skill development, how do you make use of the virtual platform, right? How do you customize your learning for virtual training? How do you create a good experience? I think those are important aspects. I was just talking to a couple of people today, and one person was into running pathology labs. A friend of mine, she runs pathology labs. She used to do very well, but she was like, "Hey, what do I do? The everything is shut down. What should I do?" I said, "Understand what is your strength. Recognize what are the opportunities that the new world is giving you." So, in the new world, for instance, for in her case, organizations want employees to come back, but they are fearful. When is the right time to call them back? I don't want COVID to spread in my organization. I don't want that to happen. At the same time, I need them to come back. If they don't come back, employees don't come back, I can't continue on a lockdown state like this. I'm making losses. My inventory is lying here, right? How do I do this? So I said, do you see the golden opportunity? Why don't you go to your create a solution where you stand as a service provider for organizations and say, we will help facilitate employees to come back. We will check for their physical fitness with regards to COVID. We'll do different tests. We'll create an atmosphere within the organization where people are maintaining social distance. They have the right kind of apparels in terms of gloves and masks, and we will put together an end-to-end situation. I said, look at your strengths. This is your strength. These are the opportunities. Change what you're traditionally doing to match the opportunity. I would say the same to L&D providers, right? Your strength is to provide skill. Do organizations need skill for their employees? Of course they need. Can they afford it like before? Maybe not, right? Can they have classroom before? Maybe not. How can you change your offering to make it affordable and to also engage on different platforms? Similarly for employees, right? I think, for people in the workforce who are wanting to join the workforce, great opportunity. I think as L&D professionals and as trainers, we need to identify what skills are required in a post-COVID world. How can you train people who want to go into the workforce with the post-COVID world work skills, right? Identify what are the skills, start preparing content, and start training them and certifying them. So you can go back to organizations and say, we've got people who are certified with skills in the post-COVID world. Here they are, and make that connection. That is what I think you perhaps need to be doing.
Right, right. Exactly. Great answer. One last question we'll take, Rajiv, if you permit. And Deep Patel asked, so over and above online conferences or gathering, how can one overcome the challenge of business and operations when he is dealing in social gathering at core and cannot be avoided? So someone's business, core business is related to social gathering and it cannot be avoided. So how do we overcome that situation, if you would like to?
Who asked? What's the name of the person who asked the question?
Deep
Deep.
Patel.
Yeah.
He's into, Deep is into theater production and all.
Yeah. So Deep, I think the short answer of it is we have to wait in businesses which require social interaction with close proximity. The unfortunate reality, but the reality is we have to wait for time to get better. The time can get better in 2 months. It can get better in 6 months, right? So until then, we have to wait if it is going to be a social kind of an event. That is the reality. There's no other answer for that. Having said that, you should look at ways and think. I think the COVID world is forcing us to think out of the box. Is forcing us to think out of the box. And you and me got to be prepared to think out of the box. And if you and me are prepared to think out of the box, you never know. You'll actually create a new format, right? And that new format will be an innovation. When you look back at history and you look at events that have happened in history, you will realize that because of sudden crisis or crisis because of war because of famine, because of disease, new inventions came out to play. Okay, if this crisis had not come, these inventions would never have happened. Would never have happened, right? Take for example the scooter, right? The scooter. Do you know how scooters came into play? Scooters came into play because it was an event after World War II, if I'm not mistaken. You see, the airplane tires, right, were actually used to make scooters, right? So that's just one example. But crisis has forced people to think out of the box, and as a result, innovations have come, right? You got to force yourself to think out of the box. Yes, we want to go back to our old ways, but I think that will take time. It's anywhere between 2 to 6 months, if we are being optimistic, is when we can go back to the world as we knew it. And people are still going to be a little scared to come out in public gatherings. Only problem and shocking nature was when they opened the liquor shops. People were happy to go to public gatherings, which was unfortunate reality. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we are towards the end. Thank you so much, Rajiv.
Pleasure.
And so it was, as always, an insightful and inspiring session. Thank you so much for taking the questions as well. And I hope it, it builds the, and I would like to, if you would like to end, or should I quote the acronym?
Up to
here?
you, Vivek, whatever way you
So
want.
I'll close with it. So Rajiv has an acronym of fear. So it is in our hand that fear everything and run, or you face everything and rise. So it's in our hands. So this is in any situation, it is in our hands. FEAR, you can say that's fear. So you fear everything and run, or you face everything and rise. Right? So our purpose of starting this series as well is that you face everything and rise. You face this situation and rise. We together will face this situation and rise. Right? So once again, thank you so much, Rajiv. Thank you for your time, and thank you for such generous knowledge and information and inspiration that you have given. Right?
Pleasure.
Thank you for everyone who has joined, and thank you for all those who watch. God bless you. Keep believing in yourself. Keep believing in God. And as I say, everything will work together for good if you keep believing in God. Right? Thank you so much. Thank you, Rajiv. We'll sign off.
Thanks. Bye.